Well, I came out of law school and really didn't know much of anything practical. I recently read that in a letter from my law school that they consider their job to educate their students for their last job and not their first job. I'll reserve judgment about how well educated I was for my last job, but I can tell you I was not ready for the first job in terms of the practical skills. I started out as a law clerk for a federal judge, and so got a lot of intensive mentoring for my first year from Stephen Williams on the D.C. Circuit. And there are lessons about legal writing and research that he gave me that I retain and think about in my work to this day. I think I consider my first real mentoring, though, to have happened in the law firm at what was then Preston Gates & Ellis, and a lawyer who took me under her wing, Connie Collingsworth, now the general counsel of the Gates Foundation, who really helped me to become a good business lawyer. The first project that I did for her was working on a promissory note, and I went to her and said, I took this project out of the book for you. At that time we had still physical books with projects, and said, I'm going to be drafting a promissory note. She said, great, look forward to working with you. And I said, so what's a promissory note? And so she kind of laughed at me and went over to her form file, and at that time we had paper form files, paged through and got me some examples of promissory notes. And she walked through that with me. She did a whole bunch of marking up of the first draft that I did for her. And then eventually we sent out a promissory note. A couple weeks later, she needed another promissory note, and this time it was going to be a secured one. So she helped me go through the same process with the security agreement. And then she took what must have been maybe 30 seconds extra to say, this is why doing a security agreement is the next logical step for you in your development as a business lawyer. And that attention to my needs as a young lawyer, to thinking about how a project fit into my development, for me was just a great example of how one ought to relate to more junior colleagues. And she continued in that way to bring me up over the course of several years that I worked really closely with her at the law firm, and it's a relationship that I've tried to emulate. I guess what I'd say generally is that there are some formal programs that are successful, and I think it probably bears trying to have a formal mentoring program and putting some effort into that. But honestly, the most successful relationships that I've seen are the informal ones that develop because of a personal affinity between the mentor and mentee, and a genuine sense of interest that a particular senior lawyer has in helping out a more junior lawyer. Well, I think that there's no question that the different backgrounds that people bring to the practice can really improve our rigor and thinking about how to solve problems. Fundamentally, what we are doing is trying to solve problems in an increasingly complex and diverse world. And so having people who bring a different set of life experiences and challenges, different perspectives about language and about the cultural surroundings that we live in, help improve our process and improve the answers that we ultimately give to our clients. I think it also improves the intrinsic experience of practicing law to have a more diverse and interesting set of people to work with. So in pretty much every way, I think it's important for us as lawyers. In a larger sense, I think it's probably important for the society as well. Given the special role that lawyers play in our society in the administration of justice, having a bar that reflects more closely the composition of the community as a whole, I think is likely to engender greater confidence in the community that the bar is doing an adequate job of administering justice in our society. One of the things that there was a senior partner at my law firm that I thought had a very good insight about failure and adversity that young lawyers face. And his perspective was that we were really lucky when we had a chance to watch younger lawyers fail and see how they reacted to that, because over time it's inevitable that all of us will not succeed at something that we do. And watching how someone reacts to that is a great test of character. I think there's absolutely a role for mentors in helping younger lawyers not to get discouraged, but to understand that those failures that are inevitable are opportunities for growth and learning, and helping people to see beyond the inevitable disappointment and trying to ferret out what the learning opportunities are that can come from a failure. To the extent that I have a leadership role from my position in the legislature, I guess the biggest obstacle that I faced was the campaign and running in a very difficult field of good Democrats, all of whom were very worthy people, and then trying to convince voters that they ought to elect me and elect a lawyer to represent them in the legislature. One of the most satisfying things about a successful mentoring relationship is the possibility of a lifelong friendship, and ultimately the fact that what you develop is a relationship as a colleague. So, for example, Connie, who when I started at the law firm had infinitely more legal experience than I had. I think she had been out of law school 15 years or so at that point, has now become a colleague. So as our experiences, as I've developed more and more experience, the gap between what we've done has gotten smaller or different as our paths have gone different directions. Now, ironically, we're both general counsel for entities that were formerly clients of or that are clients of the law firm that we both practiced at. And so we have different things to share and compare notes on. The same process I experienced much more quickly with some of the people who were summer associate or associate mentees of mine at the law firm, and who over time became my law partners. And so I think there is both a significant personal and a professional benefit from investing the time in a significant mentoring relationship. It's been my observation that minority candidates, whether they're racial minorities or sexual minorities or people with disabilities or even women, are much more likely to succeed if they see in the place where they're trying to practice examples of people who are being successful. And so I think that those of us who are members of various minority groups have a special responsibility to reach out and try to bring along younger members of the profession who are in either our own groups or in other minority groups, and try to provide those examples for them and help them negotiate the special challenges that come from, in addition to all the other things that young lawyers experience, feeling like you're alone or there's nobody who understands the particular issues that you're facing. I view it, I guess, as a kind of pay-it-forward obligation. I was the beneficiary of significant investment of time by more senior lawyers who really helped me along And so I view it as just part of the obligation of practicing law. But I'm not going to claim that it's easy or that I do as much as maybe I ought to do. The reality is that along with pro bono work and the billable work and other community activities, not to mention the outside nonprofits and wanting to spend time with partner and kids, there are a lot of competing demands for my time and for most lawyers' time. So it is something that you just have to make a conscious effort to carve out time for and make into a priority. There's a strong possibility at this point in our history that you could leave law school with $150,000 of debt, which is like a small mortgage. And I think people need to be very deliberate about that fact and about what the implications of that are as they come out into the real world. We have a number of law schools that, particularly during bad economic times like we've had in the last few years, just aren't able to put their graduates into jobs that would support the debt burden that they accumulate. And potential students ought to understand that and think really carefully about what that's going to mean for them. I think once somebody's made a decision that the law is definitely the right career path for them, then I guess the thing that I'd encourage them to think about is how they might be able to use their training to make the world a better place. That's doesn't necessarily mean that they can't work for a firm or for large clients, but I think we all have, those of us who have the opportunity to get legal training and to work as lawyers, have a special responsibility to participate in improving the lives of our community, and figuring out how you can do that from whatever professional setting you wind up finding yourself in is something that I think can start in law school, and I hope that most young lawyers take seriously. Absolutely. I think that whether it's the formal mentor-mentee relationship or just the presence of a critical mass of diverse attorneys who can provide mentoring informally and support to younger lawyers, I think that has absolutely been my experience, that the retention rate is directly correlated to that kind of mentoring. I think that if a mentee is going to get a sense that there's a genuine interest in him or her, that's more likely to develop if there is a relationship beyond just work or beyond a sense that the person is getting rewarded or somehow encouraged professionally to be pursuing the relationship. So there's that piece of it that I think makes it more likely to be successful. Aside from that, I guess it depends on the particular minority group that you're a part of. But I would say generally it strikes me that with respect to almost all minority groups, there's progress to be made in the larger world. And to the extent that a more senior lawyer can help the more junior lawyer understand not just how better to perform a specific job function, but how to be a contributing member of the larger community, that's really important. So, for example, for me, I've always viewed part of my role as a mentor for younger LGBT associates or summer associates, not only to talk to them about how to do their legal skills, but also to introduce them to organizations in the community that are doing good things and to invite them to participate in those organizations so that outside of the law firm, they can also be a part of making the community a better place, and then to model that behavior. To paraphrase Woody Allen, 90% of it is showing up. A lot of it is really just about making the time and putting the effort into the relationship. I think the questions that need to be addressed can evolve pretty organically. I don't know that there's any right answer about how to go about that, but there is no substitute for spending the time at lunches and coffees and just informal meetings from time to time, putting the time into the relationship to develop it, to be present when that's necessary. Well, in the same way that a mentor needs to put in the time, I think there's no question that the mentee needs to be able to reciprocate, to be available for mentoring. And I don't mean that just in the sense of being physically present, but also to be vulnerable enough to share what the challenges and concerns are that are really on the mentee's mind. I think effective communication, it's often said, is part active listening, but part of it is also openness and genuineness in terms of sharing. And I think unless the mentee is willing to be candid about what the challenges are that he or she is facing, then the mentor isn't going to be equipped to be able to help. So I guess the most important thing about mentoring that I've learned is that you can't force a relationship. So there needs to be some personal affinity and interest on both sides in being a mentor on the one side and having a mentor on the other side, and then almost a chemistry between the people before that's going to work. I think it's not absolutely necessary, but very helpful if that can develop over concrete pieces of work so that the mentee can actually be working with the mentor directly on projects. I just think that the depth of knowledge that a mentor gets about the mentee's work or challenges with the mentee's work is substantially different than if the mentor is only hearing about that from the mentee or from other people who are working with the mentee. And then I think the third and probably most important thing is that you just have to put in the time to the relationship. If you want it to work, it's going to be an investment and not one that you can do over the course of 3 or 4 months, and not one that probably is going to bear a lot of fruit if it means a lunch once every 6 months. It really takes time to develop the level of trust and for the more senior lawyer to impart enough learning or wisdom or whatever you want to call it for the junior lawyer to benefit from the relationship.